We have Luke from Arizona who wants to tell you that secular morality does not exist.
Got it.
Luke, you're on with Tracy and Phil.
Hey, nice to be on.
Hey.
Hey.
So I've been trying to I'll try to be as fun and straightforward with this. I've been trying to look up on the superiority of secular morality, especially from Matt's videos. And I noticed that he always goes into this defense of it by saying it's consequentialism and a preferential treatment of certain things. But that seems kind of irrational and quite religious for me. Is there something I'm missing in that? Because it seems like if secular morality is just choosing what you want to be the case or preferring to be the case, and then just making the imposition on that, that doesn't sound like a superior position.
I guess, well, before we even start, is this a question that would be best directed to Matt, or is this specific to Matt's explanation of how he defines and deals with morality? Because I just have to warn you that it's not like a comprehensive thing, that all atheists do not view the issue in the it's not like a religious edict where it's sort of rolled out to the masses because Matt said it. So if this is a question specific to Matt, it might be good for you to call when Matt is on. Does that make sense? So you
disagree with Matt? So maybe would it be better if I asked for your assessment of what morality is, or do I have to start? Because
we could start with what your assessment of morality. Like, what are you defining as morality? Because that may help us out.
As a Christian, as a Christian or myself?
Is
there a difference?
Well, I mean, I'm a horrible, selfish person of myself, so.
Right, but you still would define. I mean, if you're using the word morality, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm referring to the notion that, I'm referring to a deontological concept that actions are wrong in and of themselves, not necessarily by the consequence that they produce. And that is illustrated by the divine inspiration that God has revealed to us, that he's revealed into us by our nature and also by his word.
So you're saying that if a person thinks something is wrong to do to other people, that you start with the assumption that they are getting that information from a God?
No.
I thought you said it was inherent to the nature because of God.
Well, it's kind of a combination of both, because on the one hand, he has given us a certain notion of right and wrong, but he's defined it very clearly in his word.
Right. So what you're saying is that if I interpret something as right or wrong behavior for human beings, that I get that inclination from God.
Not necessarily.
Okay, then what do you mean when you're saying that we have this that in our natures somehow God has instilled this morality? In what way would that manifest, for example, in me?
Well, there's a certain notion that human beings have a certain notion of justice and fairness, and we always have this idea that people ought to act a certain way. And we could try to extrapolate what that means just by what we want. But of course, because people are so individual and so preferential, there's no way to fully define it. And so as a means of providing for us, God has actually given us instructions in the word. Okay,
so, but I guess then, so I understand what you're saying about, like, he's given us the written instructions, like generally the holy text would be what people are describing depending on the religion. But I want to make sure that we're clear when you're saying that there's like something about the nature of a person. What are you, it sounded originally like you were saying God instilled that into human nature, and then it sounded like when I interpreted that way, you were saying, no, that's not what I'm saying, that it's more about this book because people are all different. So I'm having a little bit of trouble when you say that.
I guess I should clarify.
If I'm not using the book and God didn't put it in my nature and I still have an idea of what is right and wrong, would that not match with your idea of a secular morality?
No, because that would imply that certain preferences have been chosen and imposed upon reality, which is what I'm arguing against.
But you said morality was about being able to call actions right or wrong.
Yeah, actions in themselves right or wrong, but not the consequence of them.
Okay, so if I have an idea of what I think is right or wrong and I don't go to the book and it's not in my nature from God, wouldn't that be a secular morality?
Has that been proven? Well, I would have to then go further.
Well, there are secular people who think that there are things that are right and wrong who don't subscribe to biblical morality, so I assume that they're utilizing a secular morality.
So is the basis of that like what they choose to be true?
Who cares? What you're saying is that morality is about having a concept of right or wrong about actions in and of themselves. And I'm saying that there are secular people who have that, and they are not using the Bible to get that. And if God didn't put it into their nature, wouldn't that constitute a secular morality, which you're saying does not exist?
But it doesn't. But we haven't established what secular morality was yet. I mean, that's the point. We haven't established.
You said that you define morality as like somebody having an inclination about whether or not an action is right or wrong. Did you not?
Regardless of the consequence.
In correspondence to God. That's what I said.
So what you're basically saying is that you only define morality as something that includes a God.
Well, yeah, in a godless universe.
Okay, so then, yeah, I would have to say that, yes, secular morality does not exist because your definition of morality makes the God necessary to that. So by your definition and what you consider morality, there's nothing I can give you that would be an explanation that would be a secular morality, because you've already basically said if it doesn't include God, you reject it as falling under the label morality. So why even have a conversation?
So secular morality is not, but so you say secular morality is not unified or bound by anything, as you said, by Matt's definition of it.
Yeah, there is no requirement, I guess, to adhere to like atheism doesn't throw down a morality that everyone who is an atheist must adopt.
Right, people have their own experiences.
That's another way of saying.
Like they have their own.
That's another way of saying that secular morality doesn't exist.
No, it's saying that lots of secular people have secular morality. It's just not necessarily unified. It's just like saying that there are Christians that argue about whether or not certain things are moral, and they believe they're all following God. That doesn't mean that Christian morality doesn't exist.
It means that people have a unique perspective on morality and how we should interact with one another.
But I'm not arguing on the preferential effects of people wanting morality to be true. I'm saying that morality is independent of our preferences. And if there is no God, morality technically does not exist because the universe has no purpose or direction.
Right. Based on how you view it, I would have to agree. I don't view it that way, but if I viewed it as you did, I would agree with you.
So how do we determine which one of us is right?
Show me your God.
And I would argue, show me your morality.
Well, I don't define morality like you define morality. You reject my definition of morality, so we're at an impasse.
Well, then how can we have any conversation about
We
this?
can't.
Because
that's what I'm saying. How can we have a conversation when you have already said that in your mind morality requires God to be part of that definition, and I'm saying my morality doesn't have that, so we're not talking about the same thing when we talk about morality. So if I can sit here and explain to you how I view the world and how I view my interactions with other people, but you don't call it morality, so what's the point?
So how if I argue as an atheist then, and I say, well,
why?
Is that true? Because if I became an atheist and I want to know what right and wrong are,
I guess what I'm saying is, why are you arguing? Because I'm agreeing with you.
But you're not. But the thing is, but if you're agreeing with me, then I'm right. Then secular morality does not exist.
Right, because you define morality as having a requirement that God is involved. And what I'm saying is, if that's how you define morality, then you've already kind of defined secular morality out of existence. And so, yeah, you're right. But I don't agree with your definition. But it doesn't matter because you can define it however you want.
And so morality is, so apart from Christian, like if I had no imposition as a Christian to say, well, this is the case, what would be the determining factor of what moral codes are true?
I'm not sure that a, quote, moral code is true. I mean, what you're talking about is a list of rules, and I don't think morality is a list of rules.
What is it? So, but how is it not a list of rules? If it's like you're saying what is right and wrong, you're basically trying to dictate rules on the universe. No,
I'm not. The rules would roll out of principles. So morality to me is about principles. The rules are not the morality. They're the output of a morality. That would be a deliverable.
Then?
Huh?
Have these principles been proven then?
I don't know that there's anything to prove. I mean, I can demonstrate that they exist, but I don't know if that you would necessarily have to subscribe to them.
Oh, I would like that, though. I would like to know how to prove these principles exist.
Okay, so for example, fairness. Would you agree that fairness would be a metric of morality?
Oh, well, if I'm starting from zero, I have to. If I'm starting from zero as an atheist, I'd like to know where I'm going from here.
I'm asking you a simple question. Do you think that fairness is part of what would be a human interaction that deals with right and wrong?
as a Christian, I would say yes, because I believe human beings.
Right, but what I'm saying is when people are trying to decide, if you ask a person, you say, here's a situation, and you have to judge whether you think these two people have engaged, right, or anybody has been wronged. Do you not believe that people, secular or Christian or otherwise, are looking at this as was the interaction fair? Don't you think people use that as a metric to determine whether or not something they've observed is right or wrong?
Wait, what?
When people are judging an interaction and you're asking them, was this person treated rightly or wrongly, don't you think that it's fair to say that when people are judging that, what they're really thinking in their heads to some degree is, was this a fair interaction between the individuals? Were they treated fairly?
Well, I'm arguing from the principle that God exists, though, and you're arguing.
No, you're not. You said, what if I take an atheist position? What if I toss this God thing? Now talk to me. And so now I'm trying to talk to you as somebody that says, okay, I'm not going to come to this with my preconceived stuff because you said you were going to set that aside so that I could talk to you about this. If you're not,
okay. Okay, so if I'm not, I can't say because I don't know what the principle is.
What you're saying is, how do people judge right and wrong interactions between people? And I'm explaining to you that fairness is a principle that people use to judge whether or not somebody, when you go all over the world, everybody understands the concept of whether or not they've been treated fairly. Were they somehow treated unfairly, or were they treated fairly? Fairness exists in cultures all over the world, that concept, that principle. Now, what constitutes a fair interaction is not the same from culture to culture. But the concept of fairness exists, and it doesn't just exist in human beings. It exists in other species as well, such as dogs and chimpanzees. So when we are judging morality, for example, there are animal behavioral psychologists whose job it is to determine whether or not other species employ morality or moral traits. When they do this, part of that is trying to define what are human beings using when they're using morality. When they're defining morality, what do they use? And one of the traits that's been identified is fairness. And that's why there's been research done to see if other species have a concept of fairness, and they do. And that concept of fairness isn't even the same between species, right? It's like weird changes in how they view what fairness even means. So what I'm saying is, fairness has been identified by people that research morality to see if it exists in other species as a moral metric. Fairness exists, you can measure it, and it is something that people acknowledge as part of how they judge whether or not an action between human beings is right and wrong. This is not difficult.
So fairness is a principle that exists in and of itself with no other ties to it. We human beings want things to be fair, therefore.
No. It's not about want. What I'm saying is dogs and chimps also have this. This is an evolved attribute, right? Social species are social because they work in groups. We have metrics that allow us to work in groups that other species that are not social do not have. Other social species outside of humans exhibit similar types of traits in this same way that help them to cooperate as a group. In order to cooperate, you have to be able to have a concept of the other as being similar to yourself, to be able to judge what they may or may not think or what they might or might not want, how they're interacting with you, if they're a threat, if they're not a threat. And there is this concept of I've been treated fairly or unfairly that comes along with group interactions. And it seems to be an inherent thing for social species. There's research on this that you're welcome to look up.
But that's I'm trying to transfer this over into action, because the existence of this is trying to make the existence of this.
Right, but if you're looking for a list of behavior, but whatever when you could put 20 people in a room and show them an interaction, and you can have like a lot of different responses about whether or not it was fair or why. People are going to judge it differently because you have all these other inputs that go into people and their experiences and their lives and what their ignorances and things like that are going to come into play with how they view that interaction. So they're not all going to have the same assessment of it, but they do have this concept of fairness. Now, to me, when you put those metrics together, things like fairness, things like obligation, things like equity, empathy, those types of things all come into play to build morality. And when a social individual has those things, they use them to judge whether or not an action was right or wrong. in situations where people generally think that someone has been wronged, right? And somebody else might step up and say, well, I don't think they were wronged, and I think that it's like this, and I think they should have done that, or they did. And so there's all these things that they'll be assessing. And there's all these things about themselves that go into those assessments. So when you're looking for a list of rules, I don't think that that's really what it's going to come down to.
So if I was starting at square one as an atheist, and the principle would be because we see fairness in nature, we therefore ought to be fair to each other.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that fairness is an inherent attribute of social species that makes them sort of recoil in offense when they're treated unfairly. And they will respond to that. What I just said? Because what you're describing is sort of like it exists in nature, therefore it's right. I'm saying it exists in nature, therefore it is. It is. It's a reality that we live with. When somebody treats you badly, you're going to react like you've been treated badly. If someone comes up and starts beating you in the face, you're not going to say, well, do I just, have this preference of not being hit in the face? Or no, you don't want to be hit in the face. You don't know why this person's come up and started hitting you in the face. You don't know why you're being attacked, and you're going to act in different ways. You're going to run away. You're going to defend yourself. Depends on who you are. But the point is, that inherent sense is not just like some, namby-pamby reference of preference in my head. This is something that actually is an innate, evolved trait that exists not just in human beings, but other species as well. And those metrics, I kind of want to just say, go and look up animal behavioral psychology into testing on whether or not other species have morality or moral traits, moral metrics, and they have done a lot of work in looking at studying how people judge moral dilemmas and things like that to try to figure out what is it that people employ when they're defining morality and whether or not these things exist in other species. And it's just simply the part of us that allows us to socially interact as a species. That's all it is. It's nothing mystical about it.
But no, I wasn't saying there was anything mystical. But if I'm starting from ground zero and I forsake all my beliefs, like this very minute, and forsake Christianity, the principle is because something exists in nature and in man simultaneously, it's therefore an obligation to fulfill.
That's not what I said. I'm saying that you have 5 fingers. It's not an obligation to have 5 fingers, but you have them. You have a sense of fairness. What you do with that is up to you.
Wrong?
I think I've had this conversation. Wait, haven't we had this conversation before? Because you sat there before, and I'm remembering this now. And you wanted so bad for me to say that this was moral imperative and moral obligation. And I was like, I just kept saying no. And the call went nowhere because you could not understand that simply pointing out that this is a reality doesn't mean that I'm saying whether or not you should or should use it or how you should or shouldn't use it. I'm simply saying that we are social species. These metrics exist in us. You can no more escape them than you can escape the number of fingers or hands or arms that you're born with. It's just an attribute of what you are as a member of this species.
So the reason why we lock people away in jail is because they violate those universal realities?
Hopefully it's because they're a danger to others. I wouldn't want to lock people up if they weren't. But in general, we lock them up to protect ourselves because that's our reaction to being treated unfairly. We protect ourselves.
But animals hurt each other all the time in nature, though.
Yeah, and they protect themselves. They will exile some members from the territory, knock them right out of the group.
But if I am starting over as an atheist, I should do things because. What
do you mean starting over? No, you're not. I'm not telling you what to do. I've already said since the beginning of the call, look, I can't do this because we did this before on another call. And I'm not telling you what you're obligated to do. Even if you were an atheist starting right now, whatever, I don't care. You're going to feel offended when somebody does something that's unfair to you, when somebody robs you, when somebody beats you, when somebody mistreats you in a way that you feel like you've been mistreated. You are going to want recourse. And so you're going to go to your group and you're going to say, hey, we need to resolve this because this person is harming me in some way. And I need some kind of restitution or protection or whatever. Or you all need protection because this person is a predator and he'll go after your kids. Or, it's like this is just, I don't know why this is so difficult for you, to be honest. It's like if a dog can understand it, why are you having trouble with it?
So dogs now have intelligence to differentiate their actions now.
Yes, you don't think a dog understands when it's behaving in a way? You can definitely. How do you think dogs are trained?
for human beings? Wait, because if I'm starting over as an atheist, I need to know these distinctions. It's the principle that because it exists in nature, therefore must keep it.
So is your...
I'm not telling you that you have to do anything. This is the part I don't get. Where do you hear me telling you that you have to do something?
And this is the reason why I say secular morality doesn't exist, because morality implies that you have
No, because what I'm saying is that if you want to be secular and not have a morality and not use your moral metrics, you don't have to. But if you want to use them, then you are secular and you do have a morality. Why is this hard? This is like the simplest thing. It is morality. It is a secular person using the moral metrics.
It's preference.
It is not a preference because it is innate.
And asserting that it's coming from a deity.
It's like saying I have a preference to have 5 fingers. I don't. Just because I can cut my fingers off doesn't mean having 5 fingers is mere preference. I was born with them, and no, I'm not cutting them off, and it doesn't make having them just a preference.
But actions are not the same thing as biological physiology. I'm talking about how people choose to act. And you're saying that it's all completely up to me.
Ultimately, it is. But if you choose to act in ways that disregard the moral metrics, then you're not acting morally. If you do act in ways that do incorporate the moral metrics, by definition, you are acting as a moral agent. This is not hard.
But if I am acting as a moral agent, there's right and wrong behavior. There's right moral behavior and wrong moral behavior.
Right. Correct. And you will have an idea of what you think is right and wrong, will you not?
Not really, no.
You won't. I don't know what to tell you. So Luke is gone. I can't do this anymore.